Alright guys, I have finally got to the point where I can start constructing the dual sector gear builds and actually start testing it out. But before I did that, while I have it all open in front of me, I figured I would just go over this video and list off every piece that I'm going to be using in it for referencing later and for helping people out that are asking me what I had to modify and what to do basically. So start off, run it. I'm going to run mine on a JG Blue to start. I have a Franken torque motor that I might try as well, but it's got a matrix pinion on it still, and I just feel like it's going to wear out really quickly. Stock D-Boys M4 hand grip. It's supposed to keep the motor relatively straight, so I figured I'd just keep it instead of replacing it. Let's put those aside. JG nylon tappet plate glued to the ZCI air nozzle, and it has the fin cut to the 11 millimeters, I believe, for the DSG feeding. Up here, I just have stock D-Boys cylinder with a stock JG cylinder head. See if I can get, it's a 70D sorbo pad in there. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it on camera though. I feel like I'm not. Oh, you can kind of see it there. I'll get a better view of it later though. Here we have SHS 15 tooth piston, short stroke 7 teeth, and it's Swiss cheese, a crap ton, with a stock D-Boys piston head. This setup actually gets surprisingly good air seal. I was in the Swiss cheese. It is a little flexible right here. You can see I'm almost like pushing the sides in a tiny bit, but just from straight down, it's still very strong. I was testing it out earlier with putting weights on it and stuff, seeing how it would flex, because that's one of my first really big Swiss cheese jobs, so I want to make sure I didn't do too much. Time will tell. Core SP160 spring and a ZCI ball bearing spring guide that I had to sand this down a little bit. I might even do it a little more actually to get the spring to fit inside of it nicely without it catching. In the shell, so we have a JG 7mm version 2 Gearbox Shell. I will most likely be replacing this with a Lonex 8mm sometime soon, but didn't have the money to do it right now, and just radiused it. I had to dig out the trigger routes in here. The wire routes in here. They were, over here was fine for whatever reason. I have just 16 gauge wire, but up here it was way too thin for 16 gauge wire. Like, it was ridiculously thin. So I had to use my Dremel and take a lot of that out. I had to modify the trigger housing. This is a stock A&K trigger housing. I had to modify it to fit in the JG shell. Stock A&K trigger. I had to modify it to fit in the JG shell. The top is all Dremeled off because it wouldn't fit over here. Modify tempered stainless bushings that I had to grind down because the JG shells are really tight. And I just wired it for my MOSFET, where you have the Deans and then the bullet connector. I did the 3-wire method, so I have on the bottom is just the 2 wires, and the top is my 22 gauge. What else? Trigger pull. I'm thinking about trying a hair trigger mod on this, but I haven't attempted it before, so I'm probably not going to. But it's not ridiculously long. It's like a normal, average trigger pull. I missed. I don't think so. So let's get on to the gears. So this is a Siege Tech 10-to-1 dual sector gear set. Obviously you can see the dual sector gear has, instead of having 16 teeth and then a wide gap for the piston return, it has 8 teeth a gap. So for those of you who don't know, what this will do is when the piston is being pulled back, by the gear is still only spinning. So the piston's pulled back, the gear only spun halfway around. It's still spinning for that one spin, and then it will actually come around, the piston will go forward, it'll catch the piston again, and then it'll start to pull the piston back a second time. So because it has 2 cutoff cams on the bottom and 2 of the tappet levers right here, I'm just forgetting what they're called, sorry. It can effectively shoot semi-auto. When I feel like I said that wrong, where it doesn't turn twice when you pull the trigger, but when you pull the trigger in semi-auto, the gear only has to turn halfway. It will release. That's one shot. However, in full auto, so that increases your trigger response by a lot, obviously, but in full auto, one spin of the gear will result in 2 shots. So that's how the rate of fire increase is achieved. What else do I want to say? Oh, and then if you noticed and you don't know what these builds are, I said I had an SP160 spring. That is because, 2 reasons. One, you have to counter premature engagement. If the gear is spinning where it's going to pick up the tooth twice as fast as it normally would, you have to make sure the piston has returned by then. So that, because what can happen is that if your spring is too light or your piston's too heavy or there's friction on the piston tracks, etc., if the gear is in that spot where it's letting the piston go, but the piston's not all the way forward yet, it's still coming forward, and the gear picks it up again, they will jam into each other, and it just creates a lot of wear very quickly, and things will break. So to counter that, you get a big spring, SP160, to make sure that the piston is pushed all the way forward by the time that gear comes around to pick it up. Also, we get the big spring because the gear only pulls the piston half as far back. If you can see where it picks it up, the piston is going to stop right there. That's as far back as it's going to go. Normally it would go all the way back here, but it's only going to go back to about right there. So your FPS is going to be dropped a lot, and you're going to have an under volume barrel, which is another thing I had to talk about. So the bigger spring is to kind of get that FPS back up there. You can also spacer a smaller spring, but I just opted to get the stiffer spring. Now, under voluming is, yeah, I have a port on this, but the piston only comes back to right about there, so it does not affect it. But you cannot use long barrels in DSG setups. Let's see if I can get one over here. So, inside this, I have a 290mm barrel, which would be okay to use, but this was my 455mm barrel from Mad Bull. This is the case. They recommend you don't use anything longer than a 363, and some other people said you really shouldn't even go past like 270 or 290 depending on what your voluming is. But if the piston is only going halfway back in the cylinder, there's only going to be this much air in the cylinder, as normally it would be this much. So the volume of air is a lot less. This volume of air is getting translated into your barrel. So if the barrel is long enough and wide enough where it needs this much air, but it's only getting this much, you're going to end up getting under-volumed, a severe FPS drop, and that's not fun, because to do that, you're either going to have to fix a port, but in this case, it's not even affecting it, or you're going to have to just get a shorter barrel that requires less air. So that is the overview. If there's anything I missed, it's probably just the pieces remaining stock. Please feel free to comment and give me some feedback on the video. And I should have this gun tested by today or tomorrow, and I should update you guys with that. So see you soon.